Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we will be looking at the behaviorist explanation of phobias, which you need to know for AQA A-level psychology in the subtopic of psychopathology. I hope you enjoy this video and find it helpful. Let's get started. Behaviorist explanations, behaviorism, analyze phobias based on external observations of environmental stimuli and behavioral responses, rather than e.g. the underlying thought processes. One behaviorist explanation of phobias is the two-process model. This model was proposed by Hobart Mowrer, 1960, and emphasizes the role of learning in phobias. It suggests that phobias are learnt through classical conditioning, Ivan Pavlov, and maintained through operant conditioning. Anxiety-provoking unconditioned stimulus, UCS, results in an unconditioned fear response, UCR, as humans naturally fear pain. A UCS is associated with a neutral stimulus, NS, to create a conditioned stimulus, CS, through threatening and negative experiences, which processes a conditioned response, CR, of fear. These phobias are sometimes generalized to similar objects or situations. This conditioned fear response is maintained through operant conditioning, through negative reinforcement, where a person avoids the feared object or situation and as a result is rewarded with a desirable reduction in unpleasant feelings, e.g. anxiety, which increases the likelihood of this avoid behavior being repeated. Names. Phobia has developed through classical conditioning. They have formed an association between the neutral stimulus, what, and the fearful event, what. This learnt conditioned response is triggered every time, when the phobias has generalized to generalization. The phobia of what is maintained through operant conditioning, through negative reinforcement with the relief they feel when avoiding what. Another behavioral explanation is social learning theory, and this explains phobias as having been acquired through modeling behaviors observed from others. An individual may see a phobic response and emulate the reaction as it appears rewarding in some form, e.g. attention. The behaviorist explanation of phobias has several strengths and limitations. A strength of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is there is empirical research to support the idea that classical conditioning leads to the development of phobias. Watson and Rayner, 1920, used classical conditioning to create a phobia in an infant called Little Albert. Albert was given a white rat to play with. At first he did not demonstrate a fear response towards the rat. The researchers then repetitively made loud noises which frightened Little Albert when he was playing with the rat. Little Albert then demonstrated fear behaviors, e.g. crawling away, whimpering, when presented with the rat. This fear was then generalized to similar animals and objects. Little Albert had developed a phobia of white rats because he was conditioned to associate the white rat with a loud noise, e.g. banging. This is a strength because it suggests that phobias can be understood and treated through behavioral approaches, particularly by addressing the learned associations formed through classical conditioning. A strength of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is that the explanation provides strategies for treating phobias that have proved extremely successful. For instance, therapies such as systematic desensitization and flooding are grounded in the principles of classical and operant conditioning. Systematic desensitization gradually exposes individuals to their feared object or situation while teaching them relaxation techniques to manage their anxiety. This step-by-step approach allows individuals to build confidence and reduce their fear responses over time. On the other hand, flooding involves immediate and intense exposure to the phobic stimulus, which can lead to a rapid decrease in fear through the process of extinction. Both methods have been shown to produce significant improvements in individuals with phobias, making them effective treatment options. This is a strength because it suggests that the two-process model not only explains the development of phobias but also provides practical solutions for overcoming them. A strength of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is that it has good explanatory power. This model effectively accounts for how phobias are acquired and maintained through learned associations. According to the model, phobias develop through classical conditioning, where a neutral stimulus becomes associated with a fearful response after being paired with an unconditioned stimulus that elicits fear. For example, if a child has a frightening experience with a dog, they may develop a phobia of dogs, as the previously neutral animal is now linked to fear. Furthermore, the two-process model also explains the maintenance of phobias through operant conditioning. Avoidance behaviors, which are actions taken to prevent exposure to the phobic stimulus, are negatively reinforced because they reduce anxiety in the short term. This reinforcement strengthens the phobia over time, making it more difficult for individuals to confront their fears. This is a strength because it suggests that phobias are not simply irrational fears but rather learnt behaviors that can be understood and addressed through psychological principles. A limitation of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is that not all individuals who experience a stressful event go on to develop a phobia. For example, a person who gets bitten by a dog will not always develop a phobia of dogs. This inconsistency raises questions about the model's ability to account for individual differences in responses to fear-inducing situations. Factors such as personality traits, past experiences, and coping mechanisms can influence how a person reacts to stress. Moreover, the model does not consider the role of cognitive processes in the development of phobias. Some individuals may have a higher tendency to catastrophize or overgeneralize from a single negative experience, which could lead to the development of a phobia, while others may be more resilient and able to process the event without developing an irrational fear. This is a limitation because it suggests that the two-process model does not adequately explain the full range of factors that can lead to the development of phobias. A limitation of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is that there is research to support an alternative biological explanation of phobias. Seligman, 1970, proposed that certain phobias can be explained through biological preparedness, the idea that humans and other animals are evolutionarily predisposed to have innate tendencies to fear certain stimuli that pose a threat to survival. For example, many people have an innate fear of snakes, spiders, or heights, which may be linked to the dangers these creatures posed to ancestors. Ancestors, who avoided these stimuli, were more likely to survive and live long enough to pass on their genes and reproduce. The idea of biological preparedness is further supported by Ost and Hugdahl, 1981, who claims that nearly half of all people with phobias have never had an anxious experience with the object of their fear, and some have had no experience at all. For example, some snake phobics have never encountered a snake. This is a limitation because it suggests that the two-process model may not account for all the factors involved in the development of phobias. A limitation of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is that there is an alternative cognitive explanation of phobias. From a cognitive perspective, the behaviorist approach is criticized as it does not take mental thought processes into account. The thinking processes that occur between a stimulus and a response are responsible for the feeling component of the response. The behaviorist approach also overlooks the role of cognition. Ignoring the role of cognition is problematic, as irrational thinking appears to be a key feature of phobias. Tamarkin et al., 1989, presented a series of slides of snake and neutral images, e.g. trees, to phobic and non-phobic participants. The phobics tended to overestimate the number of snake images presented. This suggests that phobic participants may have had a cognitive bias, which led them to perceive threats more intensely. There is also research to suggest that phobic people may have an attentional bias, e.g. disproportionate focus of thought, towards the scariest features of the stimuli, e.g. a dog's teeth or a spider's venom. This is a limitation because it suggests that the two-process model may not fully capture the complexity of phobia development, particularly since it does not account for the individual differences in responses to fear-inducing situations. A limitation of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is that it takes an environmentally reductionist approach. This means it simplifies the complex nature of phobias by attributing them solely to learned responses from environmental stimuli, such as classical or operant conditioning. While these factors certainly play a role in the development of phobias, this model overlooks the influence of other important elements, such as biological predispositions, cognitive processes, and individual differences. For instance, not everyone who experiences a traumatic event develops a phobia, suggesting that personal factors, such as personality traits and coping mechanisms, also contribute significantly to how individuals respond to fear-inducing situations. Additionally, cognitive processes like catastrophizing or overgeneralizing negative experiences can shape how a person perceives threats and reacts to them. This is a limitation because it suggests that the two-process model fails to account for the complexities of human behavior, particularly by not explaining why some individuals who encounter a fear-inducing situation do not develop a phobia, while others do. A limitation of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is that it takes an environmentally deterministic approach. This perspective suggests that all behavior, including the development of phobias, is entirely shaped by external environmental factors and experiences, leaving little room for individual agency or internal psychological processes. By focusing solely on learned responses from environmental stimuli, such as through classical conditioning, the model fails to account for the complexities of human behavior. For example, it does not explain why some individuals who encounter a fear-inducing situation do not develop a phobia, while others do. This indicates that there are additional factors at play, such as personal history, cognitive styles, and emotional responses, that can influence how one reacts to fear. Moreover, this deterministic view implies that individuals have little control over their phobias, which can be disempowering. This is a limitation because it suggests that the two-process model oversimplifies the development of phobias by ignoring the role of individual differences and internal psychological processes. A limitation of the two-process model as a behaviorist explanation of phobias is that there are psychologists who have proposed alternative hypotheses to explaining the development of phobias. Rachman, 1984, offered an alternative view through the safety signals hypothesis, which suggests that certain cues or signals in the environment can provide a sense of safety and reassurance, helping individuals manage their anxiety in fear-inducing situations. Examples of safety signals can include familiar people. The presence of trusted friends or family members can act as a safety signal, providing comfort and reducing anxiety in stressful situations, and safe locations, being in a familiar or safe environment, such as home or a favorite cafe, can serve as a safety signal, helping individuals feel more secure. This is a limitation because it suggests that the development of phobias is not solely based on learned behaviors from direct experiences, as proposed by the two-process model. A limitation of the two-process model as an behaviorist explanation of phobias is that there is a better, more inclusive and explanatory explanation that includes biological and psychological factors. The diathesis stress model of phobias suggests that some people inherit a genetic vulnerability to develop a phobia, however this only occurs when triggered by an environmental stressor. This is a limitation because it suggests that the two-process model oversimplifies the complex interplay between genetic, environmental, and psychological factors in the development of phobias. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Bye.